Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us. For months, there have been headlines coming out of Minnesota that millions of dollars have allegedly been taken from taxpayers through Medicaid fraud. Now, there are claims that Ohio's Medicaid system has been taken advantage of, and the issue is being politicized, with the gubernatorial candidates weighing in from the campaign trail. Just on Tuesday, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Director Dr. Mehmet Oz was in suburban Columbus calling for reforms to Ohio's Medicaid system. Those ringing the alarm bell are saying that individuals are scamming the system and collecting dollars, claiming they are care providers when they actually are not. To kick off the show today, we'll dissect these fraud allegations. With me now to talk through this is Tara Britton, Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at the Center for Community Solutions. Tara, thanks for being with us today.
Good morning. Thank you.
Joining us, we also have Karen Kassler, Bureau Chief of our IdeaStream Statehouse News Bureau down in Columbus. Thanks for being with us, Karen.
Hey, good morning.
If you want to be a part of this conversation, maybe you have a question or a comment, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Karen, before we get into the specifics of these fraud allegations, the Ohio House Medicaid Committee met yesterday to talk about strengthening oversight of the Medicaid system and toughening penalties. Can you give us a recap of what was talked about yesterday?
Well, it was a long hearing, which isn't all that unusual, especially as we're getting to a point where lawmakers are going to take a break for summer and for elections. But this was a substitute bill that was introduced that really kind of focuses on cracking down on Medicaid fraud as we keep hearing all these reports of Medicaid fraud in Ohio. For instance, this would increase penalties for Medicaid fraud. It requires in-person inspections before a provider is even enrolled. It requires what's called electronic visit verification, or EVV, which would mean that providers, people who are in that home health care space, would have to check in electronically. Governor Mike DeWine had even proposed that they would have to use GPS to ensure that they are actually going to the place where they say they're going to. This substitute bill also allows for the suspension of payments if there are concerns about claims. So really, it's targeting this whole idea of fraud. And one other thing I think is interesting in this is that it provides for a reward for tipsters who call in suspected fraud. And if it turns out to actually be fraud, a tipster could get a $10,000 reward.
Tara, what do you think about these proposed changes that are being talked about in Ohio?
Well, I will say that the bill includes a lot of provisions. We've seen this, like Karen said, at the end of or before a break, a lot of times where they try to pack a lot in. So I think that it's really important we assess the full situation and understand all of the provisions that are there. I think some of them, the Attorney General's office yesterday in the hearing, as well as the auditor's office, said, yes, this will help us do our job better. We can have more tools in our toolbox in order to investigate suspected fraud. There are definitely components of the proposal that are extraordinarily administratively burdensome, and I think it's important to understand all the facts in the case and the allegations before we kind of start legislating to them.
Now, Tara, at the heart of this controversy is the kind of care that's being provided and how much that has grown. Can you explain a bit about in-home care and what we've seen happen with that recently and why that's coming under fire?
I can. We have seen a shift over the last few decades, in particular, away from providing care in institutions because folks want to stay in their own homes if they are living with a disability or as they age. They may require what we would traditionally think of as a nursing facility level of care, but want to remain in their own homes and can receive care from home care providers that meets their needs, and it's a better place for them to be in their communities with their neighbors and families and friends. And it's also cheaper. It's significantly cheaper when we're talking about a middle wage salary amount of money you're spending a year on nursing facility care versus, half or a third of that cost in the community. So we've seen a big shift here for, I think all good reasons, right? Folks want to remain in the community and are happier in their own homes, want to age in place or, live with their disability with the help that they need. So seeing a growth in home care services is not a surprise. We've made policy decisions in that direction. It also speaks to the fact that Ohio is a state where we, are seeing more older folks rather than younger folks. I think, we've heard lots of news stories about that. So a way to address, helping the older population of Ohio is to increase capacity for home care services. And that care really looks like what someone would receive in a nursing facility. So it's the sort of clinical medical components, but it's also the what the policy wonks and the folks in the healthcare profession call activities of daily living. And so helping people with cooking and cleaning and caring for their homes in, whatever way they need to remain there safely.
So, how big of a portion of this is care being provided by family members versus just an outside service that would come into a home and do this for someone?
So that's a good question. I think we have kind of different pieces of data that speak to that. But I think this is a place where I would like to see kind of those numbers laid out as we're discussing this legislation, because we don't have a very specific understanding of the number of people who are caring for their family members, because most of them are not paid caregivers. If they have gone through a rigorous process to become a family caregiver, it's not as though you're just saying, hey, I'm providing this care for my family, I should get paid for it. And you sort of check a box and you start getting paid. There's, law and sort of administrative process to go through becoming a family caregiver. The majority of family caregivers are unpaid. So we have a lot of people providing care to their loved ones without being paid. And I think it's, again, this is one of the pieces of information that I think should really be laid out as we're having this conversation in the policy space to truly understand what family caregiving is, what it means to become a paid family caregiver. We also know that home care workers are one of the most in demand, places within the workforce. We need a lot of home care providers in Ohio, and if we sort of take any sort of whack at the family caregiving piece of this in the policy space, we will have lots of gaps in care for people.
Can you explain the waiver system for us, how the waiver system works, who applies for waivers, what kind of services caregivers provide that apply for waivers, and how that gets compensated?
Sure, I can, in a quick nutshell, I can attempt to do that. It's a complicated system. So waiver services and really the meaning of waiver is that we are sort of making a change to our standard way we provide Medicaid in Ohio with a waiver. We ask the federal government, hey, here's our plan to provide care in a little bit different way than we laid out in our original plan. So we're asking you to sort of waive some of those provisions. The other piece of a waiver is that it has to be cost neutral. And so looking at, the cost we would have spent to take care of someone for, a nursing facility level of care, we have to be spending, the same or less. And it's typically less when we're talking about these home and community-based services. But we have a variety of home and community-based waivers. They are both for older adults and people living with disabilities in their communities. And so that, by definition, covers, the entire range of ages. We are not just talking about older individuals in their homes. That's definitely a component of it, but it also includes people living in the community with disabilities. So we have different waivers for folks who are younger living with disabilities, and a different waiver for older individuals, but they, that those all count as waivers. And there are rigorous eligibility processes that folks go through. So it's, income based, and then also a level of care. So there is a thorough assessment done on individuals who are seeking these services in the community. They are, going through a process with medical professionals, as well as, social workers and folks who are checking in on a routine basis to make sure that, they're getting the care that they need, that they're maintaining eligibility. These are things that are done very thoroughly. We also see some different types of payment. Some of these waivers are paid for through Medicaid managed care, and the biggest one there is our MyCare Ohio, which is for folks who are older and income eligible through Medicaid and Medicare and Medicaid. And those are paid for through a managed care plan, and they work with community partners to make sure that folks are receiving the services in the community. But then there's also sort of the standard payment. But, there's lots of checks with providers becoming certified and things.
Okay. Thank you for breaking that down for us, Tara. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about Medicaid fraud allegations in Ohio. This is in light of an article published by a conservative media outlet saying that it is rampant in the state of Ohio. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can join us at 866-578-0903. That's the call-in line. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Karen, I'll return to you now and we'll talk about the allegations and where they stemmed from and how they've grown to make such an impact. So can you walk us through what was reported?
Well, this was reported by the Daily Wire, which is a conservative outlet. And so obviously a lot of Republicans are interested in what is reported by this outlet. And this was information that was gleaned from Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, information. And in this report, it claimed that $1 billion in suspected Medicaid fraud happened in Ohio in 2024, and home health providers were the reason for that. And I should say that, while some of the providers that were named in the report, and certainly some other providers are being investigated, we still haven't seen a detailed accounting of this $1 billion and whether the state has actually confirmed that $1 billion was actually scammed from Medicaid in Ohio in 2024. So a lot of the conversations about Medicaid really are about the idea of fraud in the program in general, though Republicans are certainly pointing to that report. But, nobody's saying that there isn't fraud in the program. In fact, quite often you'll hear people say, yeah, there's fraud in all of these government programs. But the way to deal with it is to try to deal with it on the front end rather than to try to catch people, prosecute them, and then get back the money, which that's a problem because quite often the money is not recovered. But I want to add, too, that in that home health provider space that Tara was just talking about, there are these folks who are providing home health care who are family members. They've gotten waivers. And I've heard some lawmakers now, and especially in this committee yesterday, really raising some questions about whether that is saving the state money, which the Medicaid director, Scott Pertica, said, as far as they know, it is saving the state money, and also whether it's considered waste, fraud, and abuse. It may not be fraud because fraud has specific definitions, but it could be considered waste. And so I think that there's a real question here about the services that are provided by family members who are giving up opportunities to work and that sort of thing to provide care for their family members, and whether that's considered wasteful or not. You hear some lawmakers suggesting that it is.
We actually have a call to this point right now. We have a call from Jennifer in Hudson. Jennifer, welcome to The Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hi. I have a son who had a TBI when he was 17 years old in 2020. And ironically, he is able to work, but he cannot navigate life on his own, and he wants to feel independent. So we started processing that when his Social Security and disability and all that came. through and listening to your comments about this, it is a very intensive process to get qualified for any kind of aid in Ohio. I guess that's going to be the way it is everywhere else. I am a guardian. I have to go through classes every year and to qualify for that, and just to be able to manage. And I have a payee company that's all set up with his wages. He works at a facility that manages folks with disabilities, but he's very autonomous except for executive thinking. He cannot live alone, and he cannot, prepare his own foods, or, he has to be reminded to do things because of the injury to his brain. What I found was the most frustrating was trying to find a provider care home for him. It seems to me after 3 or 4 of these that there is some discrepancy or fraud. I don't know what you would want to call it, in what they say they're going to provide and what they do provide as far as provisionary care, custodial care for somebody. 2 of these were really bad, where he was not being managed. He was not even though he has a care plan through the state. And we finally found one that we approve of, and he is ensconced in now, that seems to get it. But I think there needs to be a better process for managing those kind of facilities, because they're just people who decide that they're going to rent houses and they're going to sign up, but they're not really providing the care that specific individuals need. And there's no really recourse except to complain that the care wasn't good. And so it feels to me like there's some fraud in that direction. And I wonder if your guest can speak to that. And I know it's a challenge to manage that, but providing care to a disabled individual outside of the home is a difficult proposition.
Thank you for calling in, Jennifer. And let me just say, we're very happy that you found a space that is suitable and is working for the needs. For anyone who's not aware, TBI, that's what Jennifer mentioned happened with her son. That's traumatic brain injury. Tara, do you have any thoughts on what Jennifer was talking about there?
I just want to echo your thanks for sharing your story and experience. And I think that these experiences are important as a part of this conversation. I'm always encouraging folks to share their stories with policymakers. Really important to understand that perspective. And I think there is something here on the, perhaps, kind of quality control side. As you mentioned, you weren't sure that you could necessarily define that as fraud. And I think that's the distinction we're figuring out as we have these conversations at the State House, that, fraud is a crime. But when we talk about kind of what's happening in the system, we may not have the consistent standard of care across every provider in the state. And so, I think that would be a really important thing to be sharing with policymakers, but emphasizing that this isn't a request to change access, that we really just want to ensure folks are receiving quality care.
We have another caller now, Mary in North Canton. Mary, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Yes, my son is on Medicaid. He has autism. They have tried to take him off Medicaid. We got a letter saying he had to go through another evaluation, which he did, which lasted about 15 minutes. And then we got a letter saying that his condition was healed, whatever the terminology was. And so I had to fight to get his Medicaid back. it was because, autism can't be cured. So secondarily, I am his provider. I went through the training that I had to do, which was not really in depth, but I take him everywhere he goes. He can't drive. He does live on his own, but I clean his apartment. And, if it weren't me providing those services, it would be another direct support professional. And so it doesn't cost the state any more to have me do it than it would to have somebody else do it. So the concept that this is a waste it just makes no sense.
Mary, thank you for sharing that firsthand experience with us. We appreciate it. Karen, I want to go back to you and talk about another piece that was alleged in the reporting from the Daily Wire about the percentage of Medicaid money spent in Franklin County. What can you tell us about the allegations there?
Well, there was some reporting in this about how much was spent in Franklin County in particular. Franklin County is the largest county in the state of Ohio, but the reporting kind of focused on 2 zip codes in Franklin County. And we've seen this also with the Minnesota daycare situation that we saw earlier in the year, where you had there were reports of massive fraud in Minnesota, which was being investigated. And then some of those social media influencers came to Columbus and started knocking on daycare providers' doors and really focusing on the Somali community and the Somali American community. And so that's a little bit of what the Daily Wire story was kind of focusing on as well. And bring up examples of, they'd go to one place and it would just look like it was an empty office. And, they would go to another place and it was supposed to have several different providers there, and it didn't. And at the hearing yesterday before the Ohio Medicaid Committee, there was the Ohio House Medicaid Committee, there was somebody from the Attorney General's office who deals with the Medicaid fraud unit who said, yeah, this is the kind of thing we do see it happen, and it's not like it's not happening. But the question I think a lot of people still have is, are we talking about $1 billion in fraud, or are we talking about things that are being considered fraud that are not necessarily fraud, that look questionable to people who either have not spent a lot of time in that space or just really are concerned about the cost of, say, family members providing care versus the cost of putting somebody in a long-term care facility. And I should also mention that, there's been you've heard a lot of Republicans in particular talk about, well, if we get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in X program, then that will solve all of our problems, that will take care of all the spending. There is not enough waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid or Medicare or any of these programs that would take care of a budget deficit or something like that. And so I think it's really important to note that waste, fraud, and abuse is a part of the spending, but it certainly doesn't take care of the bulk of the spending and any increases.
Terry, can you give us your assessment? What do you think about the reporting in the Daily Wire?
I totally agree with Karen's assessment on it. And I would just add that, the Attorney General's office in Ohio, the auditor, and then there's the Office of the Inspector General at the federal level that, fund the state to investigate these suspicions. And so when they see suspicious patterns or, things clustered around a particular zip code or provider, those are investigated and, sometimes result in prosecution. So it is not as though criminal activity that is, happening with suspicious patterns leading up to it is not being explored. That is happening. There are robust investigation processes. I know that the Department of Medicaid has over a long time been beefing up their capacity to share data with other agencies to ensure that those things are all getting cross-checked. And so any suspected fraud should absolutely be investigated. I think it's important to ensure that we have all of the data to substantiate significant claims of fraud before we kind of go on the path of assuming that things are fraudulent.
Karen, you mentioned how these claims are something that we saw happen in Minnesota. President J.D. Vance made comments about looking at this in other states like California and Maine. And I want to ask you, this has become a bit of a rallying cry politically. What are our gubernatorial candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy and Dr. Amy Acton, Republican Ramaswamy, Democrat Acton, saying here in Ohio about this?
Well, Vivek Ramaswamy had a press conference, which is unusual because he doesn't have too many press conferences, about the Daily Wire reporting and what he wants to do once he becomes governor. And one of the things that he proposed, and I actually learned this from Tara, that he said that he wants to have Ohio get a waiver so that the state gets 65 cents of every Medicaid dollar, fraudulent Medicaid dollar spent, returned back to Ohio. Because right now, 35 cents of every fraudulent Medicaid dollar spent comes back to Ohio. Well, the issue is that the federal government pays 65% of those Medicaid costs. So to ask the federal government to pay 65% of Medicaid costs and yet still return 65 cents on every dollar of fraud found, I think is a question that we still have for Vivek Ramaswamy on this. But he definitely has embraced the Daily Wire reporting. In fact, at that press conference, the reporter who wrote the article spoke to the media, which is very unusual, and then went to the State House and testified before the Ohio Medicaid Committee. So Republicans are definitely on board with this. Now, Democratic candidate Dr. Amy Acton has not really she hasn't addressed specifically the fraud allegations here. And she's talked about Medicaid fraud and concerns about that, said that she would not stand for that. Also, she said that she supports work requirements, which is something that a lot of Democrats are concerned about. But we haven't heard anything specific from her on what she would do about Medicaid fraud, while Ramaswamy is definitely pushing that as a big talking point, and you can expect to hear more about that as his campaign goes on, I think. And what's interesting, too, is to hear candidates, especially Republicans, talking about Medicaid fraud when Republicans have run state government since 2011. And so to see some of the kind of finger pointing that's going on, though we keep being told we're not going to blame anybody, but, and then the question goes back to, did Governor Mike DeWine take it seriously enough? Did he appoint Medicaid Director Maureen Corcoran because she would take it more seriously or seriously enough? Did she? And there have been a lot of allegations kind of and some blame pointed at them, saying that they didn't take it seriously enough. And so now Republican legislative leaders say they're going to take it more seriously.
Tara, as we wrap things up here, one final question to you. If you could tell us in just a few moments what we should be on the lookout for. Do we think that this impacts the care that folks are receiving here in Ohio?
It could. We are seeing in some of the proposals in the substitute House Bill 795 that Karen mentioned, some things that could, I would say, add to the administrative processes connected to home-based care, home and community-based care. Anytime there are sort of more steps to take, that's less time spent taking care of people. So I think it could move in that direction. I would say so far we have not seen any calls for, any specific calls from Ohio policymakers to substantially change the way care is provided in the community. And we are, continuing to emphasize how important it is to maintain access. But I do think, some of the administrative processes could change for both the providers and the folks receiving services.
Well, this is a story we will continue to cover here on The Sound of Ideas. Thank you to our guest today, Tara Britton, Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Center for Community Solutions. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
And as always, Karen Kassler, Bureau Chief for the IdeaStream State House News Bureau. Karen, thanks for being with us.
Great to talk to you.
We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll head down to the riverfront and we'll spend some time on the banks of the Cuyahoga in the Flats for the next installment of The Menu. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for staying with us. Northeast Ohioans of a certain generation can most likely call to mind a specific image of the Flats, the swath of land that hugs both banks of the Cuyahoga River near downtown Cleveland. Music booming out of clubs like Rum Runners, Fagans, and Shooters. Throngs of people making their way up Old River Road. Boats stretching from the east to the west bank, and maybe even an unlucky passenger falling into the water every now and then. Now, while the Flats was the place to be in the 80s and early 90s, or so I'm told, it became a bit more undesirable of a destination for years. And as things tend to ebb and flow with time, as of late, it's seen a resurgence in popularity over the past several years. Developers, investors, and restaurateurs have opened new or reinvigorated existing dining spots and nightclubs, attracting outside money and brands attached to personalities like country star Chase Rice and Cleveland native rapper and singer Colson Baker, professionally known as MGK. We'll spend the rest of our time together today talking about the landscape of the Flats as part of our series, The Menu, which we produce in partnership with the people at Cleveland Magazine. So with us for the conversation today, we have Ryan Boone. Ryan is the executive chef at Shooters. That's a bar and restaurant on the West Bank. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us, we have Bobby Rudder. He is the chief operating officer with Forward Hospitality Group, which runs several properties on the East Bank of the Flats. That includes Goodnight John Boy, Welcome to the Farm, and I Hate Cowboys. Bobby, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
If you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. We'd love to hear your stories from the Flats, whatever era they come from, if you got them. So call in with those for us. Now, I want to start by getting both of your impression of the Flats. It's had a lot of changes over the decades, as we just kind of covered. So Ryan, starting with you, how does the area resonate with you? Did you spend much time in the Flats before joining Shooters?
I'd popped down a few times in like the most recent years and, love a good divey bar. Carney's down there. A friend of mine lives around. I'd seen it, but it wasn't really somewhere I would think to go for dinner or for a night out. I remember growing up going to Shooters like before an Indians game or after an Indians game or just to celebrate summer. But it was something that when the idea of Shooters kind of came around, it was really exciting to see Globe Iron, our neighbor, coming down there and just like what that neighborhood could kind of become. The East Bank has been somewhere that I frequented a few times, but nice to see the West Bank getting some love. So,
And Shooters was recently sort of reimagined, reinvigorated, MGK being a part of that. Remind us, when did it reopen?
we reopened officially on March 18th to the public.
Okay, so that's open now if people want to check that out. Now, Bobby, what about your experiences in the Flats? How have those changed over time?
Well, my generation ruined the Flats. So I'm 45. I was there a lot from like 1998 to 2002-ish when things kind of went haywire a bit. And after that, it was, my former partner who passed away, Scott Wolstein, and his dad did a large by parcel of everything in the East Bank. And then when I and my partner, Michael Schwartz, agreed to come back, it was like kind of circle of life for me. So we were, Fabio Salerno had opened Lago in 2012, 13. And then when I opened Forward with Michael and our team in 14, that was like, that's a long time, the 12, 13, 14 years of development. Mm-hmm. That's a long run. So we, it was like full circle bringing it back. And the first 2 or 3 years was really just, everything was still being built. The apartments were being built. Alley Cat was being built. Shooters was kind of transitioning over at that point. And so, I've seen a big stretch. So I would call like 16 to COVID was like the new era of we had opened a lot of stuff. It was and LeBron came back, RNC was here, Indians were in the World Series, so it was a magical like 5-year stretch where we had just crazy amounts of volume and memories and parties. COVID hit, and that was like a massive reset to that area. Because everybody didn't know what to expect. Post-COVID was the best. It was just an incredible 18 months, 24 months. And now it's sort of finding its level. Scott, like I said, on our side of the water, Dick Jacobs has owned the West Bank for a long time. When Scott Wolstein passed of cancer, he had owned and controlled everything, so it's like one person, one vision. And now what it is it took really 2 or 3 years for multiple property owners to kind of come together and now get a shared vision. I'm the largest tenant down there, with whatever we have, 6 places, but it does take the landowners to kind of drive the ultimate vision and development. And now I think we're in a good spot. I mean, with Shooters opening and both sides of the river now being active, Ryan and I were talking outside. This is kind of the first, this past weekend was the first since I've owned anything down there that we've had like big volume back and forth. And I think that would resonate with a lot of people, like old days back and forth. And so, you know, this is, I would call this like Flats 4.0, started like last weekend, really. And it'll be interesting to see. I would encourage like all generations to come down, because I really think now there's a position for everybody, regardless of kind of what you want to do.
A lot of variety for sure. You know, some of the properties that you are a part of, as I mentioned, Goodnight John Boy, Welcome to the Farm, I Hate Cowboys, several in that area. You mentioned it as a bit of a homecoming for you. Is that what it was that brought you back to the Flats? Were you looking at any other areas when you were deciding?
No, I was living in Chicago.
Okay.
I had my first daughter, and my wife and I like realized within a week that we were not going to make it as parents in Chicago with a kid, and so we moved back. And when that happened, the developers, Scott, my partner Michael, we just thought, you know, hey, this one nightlife concept could work really well, and you know, it turns out that it was a kind of a catalyst for the rest of what our company's become, and now we're all over the country with, I don't know, 23, 24 venues.
Now, Ryan, you've worked at some high-ticket places around here before ending up at Shooters, Greenhouse Tavern, Cordelia's, 2 of Cleveland's biggest name restaurants. What was it that brought you to join the team at Shooters?
I think similar to my time with Cordelia, we saw such an iconic address in the Lola space. And we saw that former Lola space being such a huge part of the Cleveland food culture and the food history. When I got the call about the Shooters project, it was almost one of those moments of, well, I didn't know there could be a better address than Lola on East 4th Street, or a more iconic Cleveland space that people just kind of love to come visit. And just the thought that we could put some fun and attention into the food program there, which, you know, the last time I dined there, I think I got nachos that left something to be desired. It was really cool, like kind of challenge to be like, how do you revitalize this space, bring a food concept in, have a nightlife concept, and kind of have brunch in the morning, DJs in the afternoon, and late night all kind of wrapped up into one space. And it just seemed like a really fun, unique place to create food.
You mentioned, you know, maybe some of the nachos you could get at Shooters in the past. It was a place for a cheap beer and cheap wings, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're looking for. Yeah. Do you think that people are ready for this sort of like elevated experience that Shooters is offering? What's the response been like so far?
You know, I think we like to call ourselves high-low. You can come in and get a beer and a shot for $10 at Shooters. We have plenty of things on our menu that are kind of more appropriate or approachable price points. And then we give you the option to kind of ball out and get some Osetra caviar to add to your chicken wings, or to get octopus and charred eggplant. So we kind of like to give people the option to come in and have your like everyday hangout, have a beer experience. But then also with all the boat stocking, with the big shows, to, you know, let you have a little bit of fun and get a big bottle of champagne and something nice to share with the table. So I think we've tried to create something that's a little bit for everybody.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's beautiful inside. The decor is fantastic, and I also did have some of the staples. I was there a couple weeks ago, and you know, I don't eat wings anyway, but I was really happy with what was on the menu. So I'll just say that personally. I do want to ask you, Bobby, about something you just talked about a moment ago, about how there's something for everyone in the Flats right now.
Yeah.
So that's my question to you, is because you have a hand in so many different spaces in the Flats, who is the Flats for right now? Is it tourists? Is it young professionals? Is it suburbans? What is it?
Well, I think as we travel around, every city that's really thriving does have like a central entertainment zone. And so I think what the Flats has become is that entertainment zone with an element of work and life, because obviously they have a great apartment building and one of the best office towers. So the product mix currently for people, I think it skews towards a night out, because you have a lot of different things. But what I think is cool is, you know, for us, we've built out, a 70s disco and country music and cocktail lounges and rooftops and sports bars where the experiences can be different. So what I like to tell people is I don't think it's age. Listen, late night, it's going to be younger. That's just how things tend to work. But I think at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I think you can really see a wide demo down there of people. And that's what the city wants and needs. The tourism you always want to attract, between East 4th, probably Ohio City, and what the Flats is. I think it's a great way to, if you're in town for a weekend and you were to hit those districts, I think you're going to get a really cool experience and you're going to be pretty impressed with the city, to be quite honest. So I think a lot of different people can come down and experience different things, and you come down multiple times and do different things on multiple visits, right? And there's very few areas, and I think why Clevelanders take a lot of pride in it. We have places in 10 different cities. There's very few places that are as unique as the Flats on the water. It just does not exist in a lot of markets. And so the way that we've been intentional about what goes down there, I think gives people really, pretty cool experiences.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, this is our series, The Menu. We talk about the food scene in Northeast Ohio. We do this in partnership with Cleveland Magazine. If you want to be part of the conversation, the number to call is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have a call now from Heather in Westlake. Heather, welcome to The Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this program. I just had to share a little insight about the opening of Shooters. I believe it was back in 1985, 86, sometime in that time frame, giving my age away. I worked at the Beach Club right across the river, and I saw the Shooters open, and it was a sea of people over there, and it was very exciting to see. But I laughed because I thought, this is the end of the East Bank. But as it turned out, that opening of Shooters really helped all the restaurants and businesses in that area. And it was very exciting to see that Shooters was a place to be, continued to go down there often, even through everything, all the ups and downs. And I'm very excited to hear about the reopening and come down to see it. And one thing I'm just going to add is we were boaters, and, the Flats were always about boaters and taking your boat down and enjoying that. So I hope the access has improved to boaters on the river in that area. So thank you so much.
I wish everybody had your positive attitude in Cleveland. That's great. And Paul Stancato, who is one of the owners of Beach Club, was a good friend of mine growing up. So those are great stories to hear. I hear a lot of those stories.
Thank you for sharing that, Heather. It was 1987, by the way, when it opened for the first time.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Boats, I think I can comment on that because I'm in a lot of meetings with boaters or with the Coast Guard. I think the one thing that is you're going to see starting this weekend, Shooters is back and they have their docks on the East Banks. There's actually a dock program going into place that's run by Argonaut, which is, I never knew this, but Argonaut's a school that trains all the kids who want to basically work all these huge ships that are going by. And so Argonaut, as part of a nonprofit, is going to staff and be the dock hands on the east side of the river, which will allow for kind of a more organized boating experience because Shooters can handle it because it's their venue. The East Bank, there's lots of venues. So now, literally starting this weekend, it's been 19 months of legislation and everything else to get this passed. So I'm excited for those kids and for boaters. It's a huge part of what we're doing is the boating experience.
Something that Heather mentioned there was the fact that Shooters, she was working at the Beach Club, thought it would be a competitor, really was a rising tide raises all ships. How is Shooters viewing its role in the neighborhood now in the Flats?
Yeah, I think it's something I've discussed with some of our neighbors, our friends at Globe Iron, some of just the bars around like the West Bank. There was, I think, a little bit of worry like, Shooters is opening. Is that going to take away from us? And I think, unfortunately, that tends to be a very Cleveland mindset thing.
Totally.
We like to look at it as when we eat, everybody eats. The better we do, the better they do. When they're jumping, you can come across the river and see us. We want to see not just our venue alive and well, but I think when one venue is doing well and there's more options in that area that you can get to. I know they have the water taxi this year that'll be able to take you from the West Bank to the East Bank. It's good for Cleveland as a whole. The more that there is for people to draw and come and do, and to not just go to one place and then leave the neighborhood, but be able to bop around. That's our goal, and to be neighborly and to be able to, be part of the resurgence of not just our building, but that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. We have a call now from Patrick in Lakewood. Patrick, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks. This is a really great idea, and you mentioned the Stancatas, brings back memories from the 70s. I mean, I'm very old, so I went to school with these
Great
guys.
family. Great
And
family.
The one thing that I want to urge you is always, having been down there since every single restaurant that has ever opened, from, the expensive ones up on West 10th to the shooters, please, there seems to be this attitude that if we're on the water, we don't have to serve anything good. People will just come because it's on the water. And some of those restaurants, it was comparable to dog food. I mean, it was terrible. And so I really hope that when you guys open any of these new places, especially shooters, and somebody talked about low quality nachos. I mean, that's why we hadn't gone down there for years, is because the venue's great, the views are great, but the food was terrible. So please, please, please focus on quality food.
Thank you for sharing that thought, Patrick. Ryan, I'll let you take this one as the chef on the scene here. You want to tell us a little bit about the menu that's happening at Shooters right now?
Yeah. So when I joined the project, I got to see some renderings of the space, and I thought, wow, this looks great. And like you said, we're on the water. You could probably sell just darn near anything here, and people would just love to come be here. I come from an elevated restaurant background. I wouldn't go as far as to say fine dining, but we like to celebrate local. We like to celebrate people in our town who make really great things, from our butchers to our bakers to our hot sauce makers, locally made spice blends from Chutney Punch. For us, it was as important to put attention into the food and beverage programs as it was the space and the address. And that really is what drew me into this project, was coming from these nice restaurants and seeing that a place that very easily could have just picked up Cisco frozen chicken fingers, threw them in a fryer, and had a line down the street still just to be able to hang out on the water, that they were taking the road less traveled and kind of doing an intentional, thoughtful, locally sourced food program and high-end cocktail program. I thought was really fun. So I think for us, that piece is as important as, the address or the waterfront. And we like to put our focus into the food and beverage as much as the views. So I hear you.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about something that's periodically come up around late night activity in the flats, and this is safety concerns. So I'd like to hear, start with you, Bobby, what you all are doing to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, so it's, unfortunately, things happen all over the place, but an entertainment district and really downtown as a whole in all cities are as vibrant as they are safe. You don't have safety, you don't have anything. I mean, there's nothing you can do to bring people down. It doesn't matter how good Ryan's food are. If it's not safe, it's not good. Starting in September, the mayor had weekly meetings that he, put on the calendar and organized with with myself and then the stakeholders in the city. So fire, safety, beautification, police, DCI. So we've met weekly since September to plan for now. And so a lot of energy and attention has been put towards that. And I would say there's four things that really are impactful. Number one, we've been provided, the detail and the officers that we've needed. And then the business owners have supplemented that with the Cleveland Watchman, which is a private security company made up of mostly off duties. So every Friday and Saturday night, we have Cleveland Police, and then we have off duty just roaming the area. Number two is the lighting. Areas need light. And so there's a whole new lighting package going into the East Bank of the Flats that'll be really great. And number three has been traffic flow. So when you don't have great traffic flow, just things happen. People get angry, bad stuff goes down. So we now have dedicated Uber pickup locations, which means Ubers don't clog roads. We have a whole new traffic pattern for people to get down and to park mobiles down there. All the roads are repaired. They're all relit. So it's been those things. And then it's just, the business owners and landowners working together to ensure that everything is safe. And listen, I think it'll always be over the course of time, whether it's on Ryan's side, it's on my side. We have to put energy and effort. Dan Gilbert would tell you the same thing around the stadiums and around on East 4th. You have to put energy and effort as a city to create safe spaces for people to come to, period. If it doesn't happen, everything will be short-lived.
Well, what we close out the menu with every week is, what are you eating this weekend? So we got about 30 seconds left. So what are you eating? Where are you going? Ryan, I'll ask you first.
We were just talking about Rude Food and Pie in Lakewood. It's been on my radar. They got some new fun stuff, so that'll definitely be this weekend's date night with the girlfriend.
Nice.
All right. How about you, Bobby?
I think Doug Katz at Amba and at Kiln is doing great stuff. I think Doug's been a real pioneer of great vibe and energy and food, so I go check out his places too. I'm not going to be there because I'm going to Columbus for volleyball for my kids, but I would go there. I go there quite often.
If you were in town, so maybe next weekend.
If I was in town.
All right.
Thanks,
Bobby
Stephanie.
Rudder, COO of Florida Hospitality Group, thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
And Ryan Boone, Executive Chef at Shooters, thanks for the time.
Salute.
That'll wrap up our show for today. If you missed any part of the show, you can hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU. You can find every episode of The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts and on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org and find us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Tomorrow, it's the Fridays Reporter Roundtable with Mike McIntyre. He'll be here in the studio, as always, with Anna Huntsman and Connor Morris. Karen Kassler will join from the IdeaStream State House News Bureau. Monday, we'll dig into the new master plan that's been unveiled to reimagine University Circle, and we'll learn more about another major plan, Cleveland's Midline, an effort to redevelop hundreds of acres on the city's Near East Side. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for keeping the conversation going. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.